Welcome to the Self-Service Generation podcast, where we explore how technology impacts, improves, and enables the customer experience that we all expect from businesses and organizations that we engage or work with. Don't worry, we only keep it to 20 minutes, so hopefully you'll find it interesting. Thanks very much.
Welcome to the Self-Service Generation podcast with me, Gavin.
And me, Steve.
Today, we're going to be talking about the dark patterns or dark UX, which, don't worry if you've never heard those terms before. I'm hoping by the end of this, you'll know everything about it.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, well, you're going to have to explain it to me. I kind of half understand it as we've been talking about it a bit, but yeah, you're the main man in this scenario.
So from our point of view, dark UX is basically when an experience is designed in such a way that it's their design in such a way for the benefit of the organization rather than the benefit of the user or the person who's actually using it. Right. There's loads of examples across the web that we see, and we're going to go through some really interesting examples, and hopefully as you go on, after you've listened to this podcast, you'll go on with your everyday life and suddenly you'll hate me because every single time you see something you go, oh, that's an example of that dark UX again.
Trixie.
Yeah, exactly. You've ruined the web for me. What are you doing, Gavin? That's not your job.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So I suppose your talk. So dark UX is a bit of a tricky little monster, and it is one of those like underlying little things that's when you see it, you'll now realize, and this is what we're going to talk about. But I suppose the first point of this is that when we get onto the examples, it'll start to become clear. But we have to understand who benefits from this, So this is the point, isn't it? So who's benefiting? And actually, if you say that there's a not positive effect, but a powerful effect towards the company.
Yeah, and that really depends.
Is that the right thing?
Time. It definitely depends on scale a lot of the time as well. Like if you've got scale, if you have the benefit of scale, sometimes these techniques can be more beneficial, and the balance of positive and negative can weigh potentially in your favor. I mean, a really good example of this could be, so social media wise, there's Instagram. You friggin' love it, right? You download Instagram, you load it up, and you have the option as to whether or not you're going to. They're like, oh, turn your notifications on. But it doesn't say no and yes. What they give you is not now, or okay, not now. Now, when they say not now, what that's basically telling you is, I'm going to keep asking you. I'm going to keep nagging you. I'm going to keep asking you all the time to continually nag you and get you. Now, so they don't give you the option to know, which ultimately as a customer, I want to say no. What they're hoping to do is eventually you'll give in to the post and you'll just click OK and set it up so they can continually nag you.
And they'll never ask you again after that to turn the notifications off. So if you then cave, you cave and you go, all right, I'll put them on. Then they would then come back to you to go, do you still want your notifications on?
Yeah, we're talking to you way too much. Would you like to quiet us down a little bit? And like,
that ain't happening, is it?
No, definitely. I mean, there's a few examples.
That's it, though. This is the trick, isn't it? And this is the tricks that are in there that are dark tricks that are a pain.
Yeah.
And there's loads of examples out there. And I know you've been looking at them and going, oh, I spotted another one.
Yeah, I always see. I think that's the thing. You're always when you work in the user experience industry, you kind of always see them, but actually because we're prepping more and we've spent more time looking from the podcast point of view, and you're really spending more time, you're even more conscious, and you've got that cognitive bias working, and you're kind of spotting them even further. What I always remember from years ago was Sports Direct.
All right.
So the Sports Direct one is the giant mug, right? So what they would do is you'd buy something from Sports Direct, you put it in this basket, and they're like, oh, you get a free mug. I was like, oh yeah, I want a bit of that action. Now, if you don't read the small print, what the small print actually says is, if you buy this free mug, it's going to cost you additional £1 delivery. The delivery's already costing you $4.99. You don't think about it. I'll take the free mug, but actually the delivery costs you $5.99.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll just add it into your they used to just add it into your basket. So you see it there as a free mug. It's free, it's fine. not taking into consideration it's already added £1 into your basket. So who benefits from that? Really? Like the customer's out of pocket from £1. They've made it really misleading because the person's thinking, oh, I've got a free mug. No, it's not free. It's cost you £1. So the customer is actually out of pocket because of that experience for a mug that they probably could do without.
Yeah, they only had it because it was free.
Just never come to I've definitely not done that twice. I don't have two giant
Until you
bottles of
realise
mugs to go myself.
you got so is that a line of Sports Direct mugs? To be
honest with you, the only mugs that really look like normal mug size in my hands. All of the mugs looks like I'm drinking out of a thimble. So it's kind of it's a difficult one for me. But yeah, so in that case, 100% more beneficial to the corporate organization than it is to the end user who's using the experience. And that's what we're looking at here. And and I can't remember what the exact what Booking.com actually did, but there was a specific interaction that they changed within their site, and it basically increased bookings by 0.01%.
Yeah.
Now, you're working at scale, happy days. You'll take anything, like to some extent, you take anything to get, but then what you've actually got to look at and go, actually, what is a negative sentiment of that? What is the negative of making that change to the customer? Do you create a negative experience for somebody because you've made that change? And that's ultimately the balance of what we've got to look at here, right? You're putting these things in place. You've got to be really serious about, if you're going to make those implementations, you have to be going, I'm making a conscious choice to go against my customers' needs for my own corporate benefit when you're making those types of design decisions.
Yeah, and the thing is, look, the point is it's very difficult to measure the downstream negative of that action. So they become a self-fulfilling prophecy, don't they? Because if you have this kind of 0.1% increase, you go, okay, well, that was good, and every little increment is great. But what they're not then getting is this slight frustration that people are having in general, and they may have something that's a little bit to the side that's not quite noticed. They go, we haven't had quite as much usage in general of this thing, but the hotspot inside the app has shown it that the percentage of people using that, we've had a benefit from the booking, but the overall number of people engaging with the app has gone down, but they haven't correlated that change with that change. And those things are very difficult to do because there's no direct line to that. So you've got to be super careful with that whole process, haven't you? Because if you don't have that direct line of transparency from one thing to another, you're never going to hook those two things up. You're going to be scratching your head when you've lost a percentage point of people engaging to your 0.01% that you could see because you see the journey looking lovely. But you didn't really correlate that change with the 1% disengagement of the app itself or your service.
And it's difficult as well because some examples of kind of dark patterns or dark UX, you can't really, you don't necessarily notice a direct negative direct to the consumer. It's just kind of naughty behavior to trigger something that shouldn't happen. So I had it this week. So I had some interactions with one of the biggest, I'll be really careful what language I use here, the biggest prevailers or the biggest uses of dark UX and
right, okay.
Which is
big fans of it. Big fans of it. They're big fans.
They love it, which is Virgin Media, right? So like you will see this absolutely everywhere. But the one example I saw this week was I'd had some interactions with their business team, and they sent me out this. Oh, give me some. How did we do out of 10? Give some customer feedback. Now, what you'd usually expect when you're giving it with these 10 buttons is they would go from 0 to 10. Now, Virgin Media clocked on the fact that everyone hates them, and everyone wants to give them a 0. So what they do is they put the 10 first, right? 10 down to 0. So anyone who wants to get it done in a rush quickly thinking they're pressing a 0, pressing that 10. So they're laughing. They're laughing all the way to the bank.
Too late, you've pressed it now.
Too late, you've pressed it. You've left your feedback. And for that, obviously, instantly, it's kind of like you just want to get it done. You want to get off your plate. But what that means is that then there's false reporting there in regards to what actually people feel about the business. They could, in theory, be getting accolades to how good their customer feedback is because they keep getting all these 10s, and therefore there's no real driver there to improve the experience they're giving to a customer, and therefore the negative is more long tail, but they're still there. Whereas the remarkable, so I've just had to get a pen replacement. I had had emails, similar emails in the same week. What was theirs? They were asking whether or not they had an exceedingly good experience. I mean, I was a bit annoyed they used the term exceedingly instead of remarkable. I think it's a misbranding opportunity.
Well, I was just going to say, just if anybody misheard that, the brand is called Remarkable, not just their experience that you've just experienced.
Exactly. But it was 0 to 10, like that, how it should be.
Yeah.
And I gave them a 10 because the experience I had with them was 10 worthy. So it's back down to that point. They then know, and they can get accurate data. Like if someone gets a 2 or gives them a 3, they're conscious and want to take that data and really understand the detail in regards to that. They followed on to another form which asked me in more detail what was the reason for that score. They were consciously wanting to see that. So it's back down. They can then impact that experience then, which makes a difference. And I think the remarkable one was specifically around the NPS score, which is a net promoter score, which is, would you recommend this brand to your friends and family? So you want to make sure you're getting the right. You want to make sure you're getting the right data from that score.
Virgin will kind of do the same thing, and the point is between the two. It sounds like Remarkable as a brand are actually interested in what's happening, whereas Virgin are probably going to be padding their figures quite considerably. But those figures are important figures, so they'll be used to justify statements in their advertising, because they can provide evidential information to the advertising authority when they put their new ad forward and go, 95% of people think we're 8 and above. Well, it isn't. 95% think it's 1 to 2. So okay.
And everyone who's ever been
sorry,
a
Virgin Media. I'm a customer as well, but I can't get hold of you. But but those are the things, aren't they? But it's important data. So it is very dark in that use, because it can actually be quite false advertising in a lot of regards. Well, it can lead through to that kind of stuff. So you've got to be super careful with that. I mean, I don't know how well they get caught out with things like that as a company. If it was investigated to be that. I don't want to start a scandal. I'm not big enough to take on Virgin.
That's ultimately the thing, isn't it? It's like, and that's the thing. So there have been cases in really bad situations where dark UX has been used and has been purposefully misleading, where there have been court cases which have been able to kind of act on those situations. It is very difficult to do that in most cases, just because of the nature of them. But when we did a podcast a couple of podcasts ago on consumer duty, right? So the purpose of consumer duty in the finance industry is to make sure that you're doing everything you can to service the customer in the proper way, and you're doing everything to meet their needs. You start using dark UX and dark patterns in the way that you're designing those experiences, you're going to quickly fall short of consumer duty, because you're not designing experience in a way which are there for consumer need.
No, your information is obscure on purpose, and that then breaks all the rules from an FCA regulatory perspective, which was the point of that podcast, to talk about that, and that came into force the end of July. So, if you're doing that in a different retail environment other than insurance retail, then you've got to look strong and hard at what experience are you giving your customers. Are you actually getting any benefit at all, or are you just annoying somebody at some point when they realize, because people are not stupid, and they will realize that something's happened and it's not right. I had something very similar with and this was, now Amazon are pretty good, all right.
Yes.
All right, they've done all right. They're pretty. They are number one for a reason, and they're number one because they're talking about user experience, right?
We need to make a point. Amazon are. We need to caveat what that good means, right? they're good at selling to people.
Yes.
Whether they are good as an organization
Oh,
is down to
okay.
your own
Yeah.
thought
All right.
process.
All right. There's lots of other stuff that we're not saying that they're good at, but they are very good at selling to people and actually they have just been inaccurate with some of the stuff around deliveries and stuff. So the listing showing optimistic delivery times, and then you go through and it's not, and then by the time you put it into your basket, it's a week later or something.
Yeah.
And I think they just got called up on that because it was a misleading thing. So somebody actually called them out on it, and they've had to amend that, something like that. But also sellers within there. There was literally my mother-in-law bought a bread bin from Amazon, but it wasn't Amazon themselves. It was a seller on there,
Okay.
and it was completely relabeled wrong.
What do you mean?
So they sent exactly the wrong thing, but it was very obvious that they'd sent it and obscured the one that they were doing, but it was the price point that it should have been for a larger version of this thing that she was after. Mainstream product. Wasn't super easy to get hold of, but they put the smaller version at the same price as the larger version without super accurate description to say this is the smaller one you're getting. And of course they delivered the right one.
Yeah.
The one that they said that they were going to do, that's super tricky. That's this on steroids.
Yeah.
That
And,
is
that's the
properly
challenge, isn't it?
misleading, properly wrong.
And that's a challenge as well, because if that's an independent seller going through Amazon, that experience negatively impacts the customer's experience of Amazon as a brand as well.
That's right.
Therefore, that's ultimately creates an extra challenge there as well. Who should be really blamed at fault? Because ultimately, a lot of the time, from a seller's point of view, they're quite hidden on the platform. Like Amazon, everyone feels that Amazon is the person selling the goods, and in most cases, actually, that's not necessarily the case.
Yes, no, yeah, and you've got to be super careful with that. And again, not quite as clear as it could be. And of course, and you're dead right. So my mother-in-law's probably not going to be buying anything off Amazon again because she's now been burnt quite bad. Badly in her eyes. She doesn't need to. She'll go in a shop. She's got all the time in the world. So she's not really that keen. So that's a big miss for Amazon's perspective because she got good buying power. She buys loads of stuff, So it's a big miss for them for the sake of the fact that their consumer duty wasn't clear, it wasn't good, and it was wrong. You do see a lot of stuff on that's listed there that's very high priced for something ridiculous. It's like £2,000 for something, and you go, really? It's a pair of trainers. That I know that are available over here for 130. I can't get I can't get the size though. You just go, why is that even allowed or even there? It just doesn't make sense. It's just stupid.
Always make sure whatever you're buying from Amazon, always price check. It's definitely the thing I always say.
Yeah, always.
It's not always the cheapest of places to buy things from.
No.
But also one of the big services they offer is Audible. So as with many, back down to looking at kind of those different types of practices and putting them in place. As with many online service providers, you'll find the same with places like Now TV, and also Prime will be another example of that. But with Audible, for example, I obviously signed up to one of their deals, a couple of months free, end up paying for it on a monthly basis without necessarily needing it. Forgetting to actually use it as a platform. Yeah, that's what all the subscription businesses really rely on, is customers like me forgetting, and then actually going to cancel. And then what you go for this amazing, really interesting process. You basically play the game as to how good deal can I get before I cancel. Now, I used to do this all on the phone, and it used to be Virgin Media basically making it very difficult for you actually to leave. Actually getting through to them on the phone is usually the challenge, and waiting an hour and getting cut off. But with Audible, would be a case of you go in, you go to cancel, and it goes, are you sure you want to cancel? You're going to lose your benefits. He goes, yes, I'm sure. And then he goes, oh, you sure you just don't want to? Why don't you pause your subscription, just for a month? Should I pause your subscription? No, I want to cancel. In the hope that obviously that you'll pause it and forget about it and pay for some more months.
Yeah.
And then next it'll be, are you sure you want to leave? We'll give you. How about we give you 2 months free? No, just give you free. Carry on using the service, and it's just like I think it's forced continuity. They're continually trying to do whatever they can to force you back into and stop you from unsubscribing. Now the beauty of it being online is you've got a bit more control and it is easier to make that exit. But yeah, as soon as you start bringing that into a world where you have to make the phone call, I think we've all had to have those cancellation calls.
Just doesn't make sense. I mean, it doesn't make sense to do any of those things. If somebody's decided to cancel, they've decided to cancel usually. There's very few. We have the whole, there'll be a few people that are going to drive you down on price, and that's the reason that they're trying to get a cancellation, or they're phoning you just to screw the price down on whatever the subscription is. We've done it with mobile phones.
On the phone. Let me sit down on the phone. Yeah, so someone can give me it cheaper.
Yeah,
what
no,
can you do
absolutely.
before?
I'm going to go if you don't give it to me cheaper.
Yeah. Oh no, that's just a new customer deal. I know you've been a customer for 10 years, but you don't get the new customer deal. We don't value loyalty here.
Oh no, don't start that. Yeah, that's a whole different conversation. Yeah,
it's interesting. It's back down to understanding again. If we bring it back a circle back to like who is the one who really benefits.
We've gone off piece slightly. That was your fault, Gavin. I'm blaming you.
Yeah, it's always my fault. I think I've accepted that now. There's no dark pattern here. But we're looking. That's the thing. The main focus of the podcast is talking about those dark UX, those dark patterns that we're going to experience. Ultimately, you will experience them in any interactions from a self-service point of view or any dealings where you're looking at customer experience. It's always going to be the case. So always look out. Always make sure you're taking into consideration. You have to strike the balance between your customer and the work that you're doing. Do you want to make the decision that's going to negatively impact your customer? Are you going to make the decision going to negatively impact your business? Are you FCA regulated? Do you have to make sure you're legally obliged to sit by consumer duty? And just be careful.
I think you have, and you've got to understand that actually it's not always a good benefit to the business. If you're just getting slight incremental changes, but you can really annoy customers very quickly. And I think the people are getting so much savvier now. We're in cancel culture land. We are. There's no doubt about that. So a brand can go from hero to zero very quickly by just annoying the wrong people at the wrong time. So you've got to be super careful. I feel you shouldn't use it where you don't have to, unless you're helping and you feel that that's an honest, assistive way of presenting some information or providing your experience. I think that's the only way.
And ultimately, the best way to provide data and provide experience is to make sure that you're providing the experience in a way which your consumer is comfortable with and the way that they want. So whether that is digitally, whether that's on the phone, or whether that might be through something like a chatbot, for example.
Oh yeah, well, absolutely. I'm not going to be a dissuader on the old chatbot.
And funnily enough, that's what we're going to cover in the next podcast.
Oh, that's handy, isn't it?
I love a transition. I try to do my best whenever I can.
Yeah, you're good on the segue, aren't you? You're very good. I like that. Yeah, nice.
I was segueing last week. That's another tangent. So our next podcast is going to be about getting yourself chat ready. Steve's going to talk us through a little bit around understanding the data and what the art of the possible is. And really looking forward to having that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much. Thanks, Gav. That was really interesting. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Self-Service Generation podcast. We hope you enjoyed it and found it interesting. Look out for more in the series where we take deep dives around specific challenges in this space. Until next time.